Just thinking about the Funeral March and gothic metal, they kind of go hand in hand because a lot of Motionless in White's music is reflecting off of death. Quick question, have you ever composed a piece of music or have you ever written a song in a really weird key that maybe has more than 4 flats or more than 4 sharps? Chances are probably not, unless you've been doing music for a pretty long time. And I'll get to why that is in a minute, but we're gonna talk about a band that typically actually uses these keys a lot and why that is. So in my last documentary, I mentioned a few bands that kind of trademark certain key signatures and trademark certain tunings, and one of those bands was Motionless in White. Now, Motionless in White is a band kind of starting in the early 2000s, and they kind of were brought up with this metalcore sort of sound, and by this time a lot of bands were using a lot of drop tune guitars, from anything from 7-string to 6-string, and they were doing things like drop C, drop B, drop A, etc., etc. Bands like Slipknot and Korn are really good examples of this. Now, the tunings that I mentioned, like A, B, and drop C, are pretty reasonable, and considering the fact that usually the drop tuning reflects the tuning of the song, meaning that if we were in drop C, the key to the song will also probably be C minor, considering the fact that we're usually in a minor key for metal, but also on the guitar, it makes chords a lot easier with that open drop tuning. But what if we started working with some other drop tunings that were a little bit unconventional, like drop G flat or drop B flat? So drop B flat is the one that we're going to be talking about today, because the key of B flat minor is a very dark and sad key that even most composers wouldn't use very often. The only actual composer who really liked this key was Frédéric Chopin, the Polish pianist and composer. He has nocturnes in B flat minor. He has piano pieces that are in this key, and his most famous one has to be his Funeral March. Now, of course, there are a few other composers who use this key from time to time, but what I'm saying is that it was very uncommon even back in the day. Now, going along with the Funeral March, it's called the Funeral March. It's supposed to be a very sad tune, and I think that when that piece came to light, it really showed that B flat minor is such a dark sort of sound. So why the heck would this metalcore gothic metal band use that key? Just thinking about the Funeral March and gothic metal, they kind of go hand in hand because a lot of Motionless in White's music is reflecting off of death. And the other big point that I'm bringing up is that a lot of bands fail to create their own trademark sound, and Motionless in White is one of those bands that have created a very good trademark sound. Think of it like this. If every single band in the world used the key of D minor and used drop D, every single song would start to sound the same after a while. That's why bands start to use other drop tuning keys, so that way they don't sound the same. That's why bands like Children of Bodom, as I brought up in my last video, they were able to use different keys. Now, if that were the case and everybody was using drop D, the tonality would simply be way too similar, and there wouldn't really be anything super unique. This is the big trap that a lot of bands fall under, is they fail to try out different keys, more specifically keys that have a lot of sharps or flats in the key signature, because we're simply not used to it as guitarists. As guitarists, we're simply used to doing things like E minor, A minor, D minor, maybe C minor, things like that. Things that don't have a lot of sharps or flats in the key signature, because that makes us have to use things like bar chords, things like unconventional spots on the fretboard, etc. And a lot of bands do fall under that trap, where they slowly start to sound the same after using the same key. And so upon listening to all of their songs, the songs that are in B flat minor for Motionless in White are Immaculate Misconception, Death March, Untouchable, Voices, Eternally Yours, Disguise, Headache, Code, Thoughts and Prayers, Masterpiece, and Cause of Death. Those are the ones that I found, at least. But funny enough, the ones that were not in that key usually were very close, like drop B, drop A, drop G flat, things like that, okay? And a lot of those songs are their big hits. That's why when you hear a low chug of B flat, you think of Motionless in White. Now, one song that I mentioned in there was a song called Eternally Yours. Eternally Yours features a really pretty melody in B flat minor, and Eternally Yours follows a really simple chord progression in B flat minor. So what I thought would be cool is, since I brought up Chopin, is I'm going to take Eternally Yours, their motion picture version with just the piano, and I'm going to alter it a little bit into a more Chopin style, because the melody does sound sort of Chopin-esque, but I feel like I can add a little bit to make it even more so. Motionless In White knows how to make really good hooks in their lyrics, they know how to make really catchy riffs, and they know how to still hit you very hard with their drop tunings and with their breakdowns. They're very easy to digest song styles, and they know how to use MIDI instruments to make really nice melodies and rephrase things. Now, going back to the point that I made of why people don't use this key is just looking at the circle of fifths. So if you look all the way down to B flat minor, we have 5 flats in the key signature. Just looking at that and looking at all the other keys that are in that area, we really don't get that very often. Because as I said, most guitarists and bassists are used to using the open strings. And if you use keys like that, you're not going to be able to use as many open strings. Unless you, of course, drop tune like Motionless In White does. And now you need to understand that they use baritone guitars. Now the word baritone simply means octaves that are within a bass and a little bit of a tenor feel. So that means that if somebody says to play a baritone saxophone, that is going to be a lower frequency of octaves on that saxophone versus a regular alto saxophone. And if this is applied to the guitar, they are meant to play lower tunings, okay? They are meant to be in drop A sharp as Motionless In White is. And this is kind of sort of setting up modern metal a little bit, because I'm noticing a lot more bands are using unconventional drop tunings and different keys. So if I could give you guys any advice for right now, I would say to explore different keys that have a lot of sharps or a lot of flats, because you'll find new melodies, you'll find new chord progressions, and you'll be able to stick out a little bit in your music in general. And also, of course, it'll help you with your guitar skills, because we're not used to playing notes that are in between the dots, as we say. So give it a try, and I will see you guys next time.